Thank you, Bhargavi. I welcome you all to today's session on Think India Literature Festival, session number 3, uh, in the august presence of Shri Ram Madhav ji and Mrs. Advaita Kala ma'am. And the topic for today's session is A New Dawn in J&K towards Atmanirbhar Bharat. Since I've been called here to give a brief introduction about Think India, very precisely in the matter of next 2 minutes, I will just give a glimpse of that. So, what began in 2006 as a seed to connect the youth of nation studying in various national institutes with the nationalistic thought process and to harness their collective potentials that are yet to be manifested with the aim of national reconstruction. So, we as a pan India organization have been striving towards this very goal to infuse in the young minds of the country a nation first attitude, to develop in them a solution oriented thinking process, and to inspire young India to serve the society. We have been working in collaboration with various individuals and enterprises at various levels to ensure the maximum opportunities for students and professionals in our network to develop and contribute in various dimensions. Uh, so we have been providing various internship schemes like Anubhuti, Vidhi, Niti, Sansadiya, the International Law Commission internship, the Samvad internship, the Survat internship. And thereafter, we are also providing various fellowship opportunities like the Diksha scheme. Thereafter, on to previous year, we launched 24 forums. So the forums have been launched with a vision to connect the youth of the nation to issue-based academic research and to identify the issues and challenges that are being faced by society in various stratas, be it the human rights, be it regarding gender studies, governance and policy, for child rights, uh, for nature and environmental forum, and so many. So we launched a plethora of schemes under that like the Tribal Rights Forum. It has a number of initiatives like the Chitra, like Sabriki Kutia Se scheme. There are call for papers, and all of it is throughout the day. We have some event or the other. We also have the Writers Forum, where every month we conduct national article writing competition, book discussion sessions with various eminent authors, eminent guests. We have the coding forum, various language forum. We also have various flagship events like the E-Model United Nations, E-National Youth Parliament, uh, uh, the Ingenious, the Startup and Innovation Summit that was launched in November 2020, the previous year. We also have the flagship event Jagrati Youth Conference that is hosted every year at IISc Bengaluru, All India NIT Students Conference, the National Law Summit, National Symposium on Licenses, and we also conduct various campus activities like the study circles, campus development programs, mentorship programs. So there are events, symposiums, workshops, even at the campus level. Even we take up an initiative called One Campus, One Problem, One Solution, wherein we take up a problem that is being faced locally by the students there or the local community there, and we try to find a solution to that and to implement that there itself. So all of it, we are trying to do the all-round personality development of the students and the community that is associated with us. Thank you. That's all. And I welcome you all once again to the third session of the Think India Literary Festival. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now, without any further ado, I'll introduce our guests to you all. Today, we have Shri Ram Madhav ji sir with us, who is an Indian politician. Sir has served as National General Secretary of Bharatiya Janata Party. Also, Sir was a member of National Executive of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and he has also authored few books. Sir's latest book is Uneasy Neighbors, India and China After 50 Years of War, and in Hindi it is Asahaj Padosi. Today we also have Advaita Kala ma'am with us. Ma'am is an Indian author, screenwriter and columnist. Ma'am has written screenplays for films such as Anjana Anjani and Kahani. Apart from writing for films, ma'am has also written 2 novels, Almost Single and Almost There. Currently, ma'am is working as contributing editor at NTR Head. Not only this, but during pandemic, ma'am has helped many daily villagers and poor people through her community kitchen by name Janta Rasoi, which is in Gurgaon. So once again, I welcome you, sir and ma'am, to the session. If anyone has questions during the session, please put it in the chat box. And now let's begin with the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. It's indeed a great honor and a privilege to be in conversation with Shri Ram Madhav ji. You introduced me as a screenplay writer, so I can be a little dramatic and say that 50, 60 years down the line, when all of you young people will be in your 70s and 80s, and you'll discuss Jammu and Kashmir and this period of the abrogation of Article 370, I think Ram Madhav ji is going to be one of those names that you're going to recall very often when you talk about this, and also recall, hopefully, this conversation that we all have the privilege of hearing live from him, and he's kindly also agreed to answer a few questions as and when they come up. So really, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be here, and we are all, of course, very excited about what lies ahead for Jammu and Kashmir, and of course Ladakh as well. And I would really like to start, Ram Madhav ji, by asking you about your own personal connect with Kashmir. How did that come about as a public figure, as somebody who has been in seva activities for so many decades, and we traveled all over the country and focused in a lot of different areas of the country, even the Northeast we've seen. What was it about Kashmir that resonated with you on a personal level? Unmute, sir. We can't hear you. You're still muted.
Okay, thank you, Advaita ji. I thank our young Think India Forum organizers for creating this wonderful session today and giving me this opportunity to share some of these ideas with all of you. Advaita ji, ideally, I would not have wanted to start off with my personal feelings and all that. Much bigger than what I personally had with it or what I did or did not do there. But since you asked very briefly, let me tell you my association with Jammu and Kashmir in physical form goes back to early 2000s when I shifted to Delhi as RSS spokesperson in early 2000. That was said to be decided in 2001. I started visiting the Kashmir base. But that apart, in RSS, until 2019, I would say, not a single year used to pass without we in the RSS passing one resolution or the other about the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, how to retrieve it, how to somehow do away with Article 3, etc., etc. Jammu and Kashmir has always been a very, very integral, important issue with the RSS right from the beginning, for that matter with the entire Sangh Parivar, including BJP. So our association with that issue goes back many decades. But yes, personally, I was involved in dealing with the people in Jammu and Kashmir, dealing with the administration there for at least 15, 16 years. That has given me a lot of understanding about the situation there. So when the party assigned me in 2014 to directly handle the political affairs there and work towards forming a government in the state, my past association with the people, my past experience visiting the state on a number of occasions, that came very handy to me in dealing with the forces there. Remember, when we formed the government in 2015, we were, Mufti Muhammad Saeed, who was our counterpart in the government at that time, he used to say that it was like North Pole and South Pole coming together. Normally, when South Pole and North Pole come together, there is going to be pralaya. I mean, a huge disaster will happen if something like that happens. But here, it was not a disaster, it was for the good of the state that we got together. And that 3-year period also gave a lot of new experiences, new understanding, insights to me. So my association has been quite long with Jammu and Kashmir.
Ramaji, another thing that is not often spoken of was the role the second Sarsang Chalak, Guruji Govalkar, played back in the day when he went to visit Maharaja Hari Singh, who was, refusing to sign, the accession, as well as refusing to meet people. In fact, Lord Mountbatten went to meet him and he refused to meet him. Mr. Kriplani, who was the Congress president at the time, went to Kashmir to meet him. He refused to meet him. And then Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel requested Sri Guruji to go. Could you tell us a little bit about that incident?
It is a very important phase in the history of Jammu and Kashmir as such. It's important for us in RSS that we also played a very critical, crucial role there. But in the history of Jammu and Kashmir, that particular phase, I would say between June, it's June 3rd plan is what is called the partition plan. From June to October, finally, when he came forward to sign on the instrument of accession, those 6 months was very critical. As you rightly pointed out, Sardar Patel was responsible for the integration of all the states. He was doing that. He tried his best to convince the Maharaja about coming forward and merging his states, signing on instrument of accession, like more than 540 states in the rest of the country. You are very right. Maharaja steadfastly refused, partly because of one of his prime ministers, Mr. Ramchandra Kant. He was also responsible for that. That's all history. But then Sardar Patel did not want to use force to, use any coercion to force the Maharaja to sign. So he tried various methods. As we pointed out, he sent different leaders to meet with Maharaja. One of them was the second chief of the RSS, Guruji, we call him popularly, he is known as Guruji popularly, Madhav Sadashiv Golwalkar. He was also sent. He went, he explained to the Maharaja about the need for not further delaying the merger, and Maharaja looked convinced, of course. Obviously, it all happened only after the tribesmen invaded his state. Until then, he delayed it, and finally, on 25th, 26th of October 1947, he had to sign the instrument of accession. But yes, in that, the then RSS chief, Guruji Golwalkar, on the request of Sardar Patel, had also played an important role in trying to reach out to Maharaja and convince him.
Back to the present, the abrogation of Article 370, those of us who support it, and I would count myself one of those people, as well as those of a fewer, I'd say a minority, who do not support it. The one thing that we probably have in common is that we didn't think it would ever happen, or there was a part of us which thought that it would never happen. What took you to that point, the government, to say that now is the right time to do this?
Advaita, you should allow me a few minutes to explain this whole thing. It's a very important question that you asked. When Article 370 was being contemplated, during the making of Indian Constitution, there was one Constituent Assembly formed in 1946 to frame a constitution for India. When the issue of providing certain special rights to Jammu and Kashmir came up before the Constituent Assembly, before that, just before presenting it to the Constituent Assembly, it was placed before the Congress Working Committee. Originally, the idea was Jawaharlal Nehru's brainchild. Matter was to be presented before the Congress Working Committee. Nehru was not in India, he was abroad. So the matter came before the Congress Working Committee, and not many people probably are aware that Congress Working Committee at that time had unanimously rejected it. They cannot give any special privileges to one state. So Nehru was abroad. Nehru was informed about the decision of the Congress Working Committee. So Nehru was furious. He immediately telephones to Sardar Patel and tells him, look, I have given a word to Sheikh Abdullah that he will get certain special privileges. Now I cannot go back on this. It's your duty to convince Congress Working Committee. So next day, Patel again calls a meeting of the Congress Working Committee and explains to them, look, none of us want any one state to be having any positive discrimination like this. We all should treat the whole country on the same, legal status. But Nehru has given a word. It should not look like Congress is now disowning Nehru. So let us now carry on with it. Then the matter finally went before the Constituent Assembly. You will be again surprised to know there was a lot of resistance to Article 370 in the Constituent Assembly. Like Hazrat Mohani stood up and told Ambedkar and Nehru and Rajendra Prasad that if you are insistent upon giving special status to Jammu and Kashmir, why not to Baroda? Why not to other states? Why only to Jammu and Kashmir? So I totally oppose it. Then Gopalaswamy Iyengar, who was moving this resolution, stood up and said, look, there were certain historical situations there. There was this army invasion from Pakistan. There is a special situation. So that's why we are giving. It's only a temporary measure. This was the commitment given at the time in the Constituent Assembly. That's the reason why in 1950, when Indian Constitution, Article 370 was inserted, it was inserted under temporary measures. That was the section under which Article 370 was inserted. Now, temporary got continued for very long. In 1960s, National Conference members from Kashmir confront Jawaharlal Nehru. This is 1963 I'm talking about. They tell Nehru that we don't want this 370. It's not doing any good to us. On the contrary, rest of the country is thinking that we are now being favored unethically, unconstitutionally, we are being favored. We don't want this discrimination. Please take it away. Nehru's reply to them was, you are right. This Article 370 has become a useless article, redundant article. But itna hi hai, ye ghiste jayega. It will erode and corrode by itself. Why I am mentioning these things is for us to understand that this article came into the Constitution in a surreptitious manner. Not because of the consensus, but because Nehru gave a word to Sheikh Abdullah, it had to be inserted. It was committed that it would be a temporary one. Nehru himself said it will go by itself, it will erode and corrode by itself. But what happened was everybody wanted it to go, but nobody had the courage to remove it. What Prime Minister Modi did was to show the courage of conviction. You know, people can have conviction. Nehru had a conviction, it's a useless law. But he did not have the courage of conviction to do everything. So, when an opportune moment, 5th August, last 2019, it moved to the most constitutional procedure, let's say, for us to understand. Article 370 inserted into Constitution in a more constitutional manner. Inserted, but it was in a most constitutional manner. One a small aside, since you mentioned about it, about August 5th, you know, when it was removed, since I have been working in Kashmir for 15 years, this is what I told Shri Amit Shah also. Look, if it was so easy, why did it take so long? Nadu also said, you know, we never thought that it would go. We always used to say that it should go, but we never had that confidence that it would go. So it actually went, we have to be very surprised. Yeah, if it was so easy, why did it take so long? Then the reply gave was interesting because it needed a Modi with the courage of conviction to do it. That is the significance of the doing away of Article 370.
Madhavji, what was the response of the ordinary Kashmiri to this? You have many contacts across the state. You have engaged with them for many, many years. Aside from the politics, what was the response that you were getting from the normal people, the local people of Kashmir?
The whole country is witness to the response from people of Kashmir in the last 18 months. You have not come across any major outbreak of violence or major resistance to government's decision from the people of Kashmir. Of course, people of Jammu have always wanted it to go. They always wanted to be fully integrated with the rest of the country. But even in Kashmir, the myth used to be, and if you people who watched the parliament debate on those 3 days, August 5, 6, 7 of 2019, You may recall that the opposition leaders were saying that there would be a bloodbath on the streets of Srinagar, on the streets of Kashmir. Nothing has happened. As you claim that every Kashmiri is a community problem, it's to say that. Kashmiris never had any great attachment for that article. Only the ruling families, I would say, about 200 to 300 ruling families have developed huge vested interest in that article, because that article had allowed them a free run in the state. Nobody to stop them, nobody to question them. Many government of India's laws could not be implemented until these great 300 families approved of them. So they had a veto power over even union government's decisions. They were enjoying, they were exploiting the situation using those laws. But ordinary people, for them, it never mattered. So what actually happened was, when the article was removed, we lived under Article 370 for 7 decades. We did not get anything. Only leaders got lots of benefits. So ordinary people, their lives remained only ordinary. So let us give an opportunity to life without Article 370. So there was an anticipation. Okay, let us see. If it does good to us, let us welcome it. That's the reason why people did not come out in large numbers to protest. Now I tell you something very interesting. Many efforts were made by the regional party leaders, Kashmir Valley party leaders, to mobilize people on a large scale. For example, to protest against the arrest of Shri Farooq Abdullah, a rally was called in Srinagar. You know how many people came for the rally? 5 people. Out of which 3 were Farooq Saab's immediate relatives. Why did people not come out? The reason was people had seen through the game of these leaders for 7 decades. They decided that there is some change happening. Why not give that change a chance? That is the mood. Again, a small aside, when I went there, I mean, we used to hear a lot of people screaming here in Delhi about the arrest of the leaders there. We used to tell the country and also our foreign friends that it's a temporary measure. It's called preventive detention. They will all be released very soon. Like that we used to convince. But when I went to Kashmir Valley, the local people used to come up and say, no, don't be in a hurry to release them. Let's get inside. We don't want them to come back and then create unrest in the valley. So there was a public sentiment which was not reacted by more. It means if there is a bigger response on the government, it has to now prove to the people of Kashmir that your life will be much better without Article 370 than what it used to be under 370. Government is working in that direction. Have we lost connection with Advaita?
सर ड्यू टू कनेक्टिविटी इशू अद्वैता मैम का है ना नेटवर्क चला गया है तो वो बस ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं 2 मिनट में मतलब शी इज ट्राइंग सर आपके एंड से भी है ना थोड़ा सा इंटरनेट कनेक्शन स्लो है अगर ठीक से वहां से कनेक्ट कर सकता है तो अच्छा रहेगा सर प्लीज
the abrogation of Article 370, but even before that, when we were in power also, there was a huge injustice done to the Kashmiri Pandit community, the Kashmiri Hindu community in Jammu and Kashmir. They were forced to become, refugees in their own state, in our own country. There have been efforts from our side to see if we can ensure the return of the Pandits to the valley, but it required two conditions. One was that there should be a dignified living opportunity for a dignified living. Number two, the living should be safe and secure for them. So keeping that in view, in the last few years, we tried to create exclusive job opportunities for the Kashmiri Pandits to return. About 7,000 jobs have been created. Several of the Kashmiri Pandits have tried to use that opportunity to return to the valley. Many have gone back also. They are now doing their working in many areas in the Kashmir Valley. But I must admit that when it comes to providing full security or proper dignity for them, it still remains a challenge there. In the Kashmir, there are still forces which do not want the return of the Pandits. We are all committed, and Kashmiri Pandit community is also eagerly waiting for the opportunity to go back. Hopefully, as things develop, they will be with dignity able to go back and lead their lives as citizens of Kashmir Valley.
Yes, sir. The next question is, could this move of abrogation of Article 370 have been implemented by a proper discussion and inclusion of the citizens of the state?
Pardon me, I did not get it properly. Your voice was breaking.
Yes, sir. I'll repeat. Could this move of abrogation of Article 370 have been implemented by a proper discussion and inclusion of citizens of the state?
Inclusion of?
Citizens of state.
Look, Parliament is the forum for amending the Constitution. In our country, that is a system that we follow. And there was full and proper discussion for 3 full days in the Parliament about the decision of the government to abrogate. And through a proper parliamentary procedure, the article was abrogated. Now, if any decision that government takes, it cannot be subjected to popular scrutiny of any given state. Jammu Kashmir's integration with the rest of the India is a matter for the whole, not just for some people in some state. So when we took it up in Parliament, what we did was the representatives of the entire country sat together. That included the representatives of. We all took the decision through the parliament procedure. That is how the people's views are accepted. Now, just 2 things I would like to add. Some people complained that, you did it so swiftly, you did not give time for people to react. I only say that nothing we're talking about it last years. Saying that we wanted this 370 to go. When we get the opportunity, we will do away with it. Number 2, about the view of some people. If suppose some people have different view, judiciary is the option available. And as of now, as on today, the matter has been taken to the Supreme Court by interested parties, like the local valley-based political parties. If there is any different view to be taken, that will be taken by judiciary, or judiciary will probably uphold the decision of the parliament. We should await the judicial scrutiny of it.
Yes, sir. Next question is, what is the stand of BJP on freeing Hindu temples from state control?
See, Hindu temples related issue, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now one must understand that administration and management of temples is a state subject. States, different state governments have to take a view on that question. There are different kinds of endowment laws, different parts of the country, different states. Some states allow for the functioning of big private temples. For example, states like Maharashtra allow for the functioning of private temples. Similarly, states like Delhi and other places, they allow private functioning of the temples. There are some states where the control of the temples is very strongly in the hands of the governments. For example, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, even Madhya Pradesh, many states in the country, they have endowment laws which control and regulate the functioning of the temples there. Ideally speaking, we have always been in favor of temple management to be in the hands of the devotees, in the hands of the people, not in the hands of the government. Towards that end, more effort is needed. We need to, put pressure on different state governments to allow people management of the temples. It must be done in a phased and careful manner. It's very romantic to say that overnight government will simply withdraw and allow us to be done by the people themselves. What will happen is in no time people will start fighting over who should control which temple. So the temple matters will go to the court. So we also need, that's why we also need to come up with a model which would not allow for any disputes to lead to problems in the temple management. Instead, this people's participation should allow for better management of the temples. Towards that end, we and the organization RSS, I think even BAP, we are all in favor of that. Although government technically controls temples in almost all the major states in India, you must remember, government's focus is only on temples that produce revenue or that have got land assets and all that. There are thousands of temples in the country, in all states, which are in very poor and bad shape. Why not communities start developing those temples? There, no government will stop you. Yes, there will be one fear. Once that temple starts earning, starts making revenue, then suddenly temple will appoint government will appoint executive officer there. That danger is there. That needs to be averted. But a lot can be done even now from the people's side for better management of our temples.
Yes, sir. Next question is, there are many international agency reports regarding Kashmir which have been coming since time immemorial on human rights violation. How is the government looking at it as a previous government bore down to them?
International reports many times base their views, their opinions on certain Indian sections which provide them that information. Unfortunately, there are sections in India, the so-called neoliberal sections, which always portray a very negative image about our government, its decisions, its actions, before the international watchdogs and international institutions. Essentially emanating from the neoliberal sections of our country, those reports come out and say a few things that probably are not very palatable to people like us. So number one, we should remember that they need not be based on any credible reports, credible data, credible information. They could be biased or they could be ill-informed reports. But what we should do is not to dismiss them, not to say that who are you to tell me? That's one way for us to always react. But we should give up that smugness. we should challenge them. Like Think India should come out with a point-by-point rebuttal to reports like Freedom House report. Like Freedom House report says that dozens have been illegally detained in India. Is it true? Utterly false. We should be able to tell the Freedom House that you are basing your arguments on very wrong sources. This is the reality. A few of them had to face the law and order establishment, but there were credible reasons for it. So like that, we need to counter this propaganda with facts. Especially very great, rightful indignation. We get very annoyed when such reports come. We then, of course, talk about conspiracies, etc., etc. There are conspiracies, no doubt, but we seldom challenge them. Challenge them on credible grounds. So we should also now learn to challenge them on these issues. What you are saying is not true. We should tell them. Because I have read the Freedom House report, which is one of the latest reports accusing India of human rights violations, not just in Jammu and Kashmir, but in the whole country. But the 4 areas where they are saying that India is now, situation is deteriorating. One of the areas is, for example, they are saying Indian judiciary is compromised. No, is it true? Indian judiciary is fiercely independent. It is not compromised. But then that is the feedback. Why? Because they gave a couple of judgments that are in favor of the government. Or they are saying Indian media, large sections of Indian media are obliged to the government. Is it true? We have channels, we have websites dedicated to attacking the government. Their whole job is only to attack the government. So these are the areas on which we should actually respond in a very research-based, thorough way. That somehow we don't do. We somehow lag behind in that one particular area. We have to improve all others in that area.
Yes, sir. So ma'am has joined us again. So ma'am, you can take over from here.
Okay, thank you so much. There's a bad echo. Sorry, I'm going to just come from my phone because there's a huge internet problem. Ram Madhavji, I think this is a very important topic that has been touched on, because Freedom House is also funded by the state government in the US. So it's actually a government funded agency. And you're absolutely right. The propaganda is very, very powerful and all pervasive. Very recently, you must have, since we have a lot of students with us here as well, you must have heard about the Rashmi Sawant case at Oxford University, or for that matter, what goes on at Rutgers University and the kind of Hindu-phobic, attitudes that are prevalent over there. What do you think is the best way to tackle these issues? Because there is a concentrated and a coordinated effort to undermine.
Yes, look, first of all, many independent agencies in the world, in many of these Western countries especially, they get funding from government agencies. That should not be or cannot be held against them, number one. I mean, government funding happens to many organizations in the West. But the important point that you are making is that, they become victims of propaganda. And that propaganda emanates from within our country only, and in most cases, from within our own Indian community itself. Now you refer to Oxford. The whole problem in Oxford is not from any merely biased or ill-informed non-Indian students. It's actually from Indian students. How do you tackle those situations? The new Hindu phobia that is being created in various intellectual nerve centers like academic institutions, media, think tanks, these are all becoming targets of this new Hindu phobia. How do you tackle it? It's a very important question. And I must tell you, since you referred to Rutgers, the students of Rutgers have shown us the way. Look, they stood up. They challenged the narrative of one very irresponsible, arrogant, and very badly informed, very ill-knowledgeable professor who believes in abusing the religion. without really coming up with any credible critical arguments also. See, nobody should say that my religion should not be questioned. Everything in the country, in the world is subject to scrutiny, but that should be rational, that should be logical, that should be sensible. Like you have to keep in mind the sentiments of the people. When somebody like Adri Trusky, if she indulges in abuses, if she calls Hindu God speaks and all that, then how do you tackle it? Good thing is the Rutgers students, the Hindu Student Council and other bodies there stood up. They immediately, mobilized a big petition against this kind of violation of our religion, our dharma. And they reached out to the management. They reached out to wider community. Now they are getting a lot of support. Finally, the Rutgers management had to climb down and say that yes, this kind of violation is not correct. So that is the proactive way in which we should engage. That is precisely what I was saying earlier about the reports also. It's one thing to become a crybaby. Like, we are being harassed here, we are being abused there, is one thing. It's quite another thing to stand up to that bullying. When Freedom House does it, stand up and say that no, your expression is wrong. So this kind of effort, youngsters like, the members of Think India and all, should try and undertake.
Ram Madhavji, when you think of, you've said this in the past as well, that statehood is something that can return, should return, if I'm not mistaken, to Kashmir. And, this delimitation in the sense that Ladakh became a union territory, Kashmir Valley became a union territory. There's been a lot of angst about that. What do you think is the way forward? And why do you say that it was a necessary step?
Jammu and Kashmir is was a state which was changed into a union territory because of the major constitutional change of status that was being affected in that state. It needed some time for the government to manage the administration there because a big state was being divided. One separate entity called Ladakh Union Territory was being created, and a major constitutional provision was being done away with. So the situation, which was a very, very big thing from the point of view of our constitution, needed Government of India administrative that's the reason why residual Jammu and Kashmir was converted into a union territory. By doing that, the state's home minister, the union home minister, was on record in the parliament stating that at an appropriate time, it will get its statehood back. Jammu and Kashmir was a separate state earlier, and it should get its statehood back. That's what people of the state also want. At an appropriate time, it will happen. So, since people of the state, especially people including those in the valley, have responded largely positively to this major change of status affected by the government, namely removal of Article 370. Now, I always believe that government should now reciprocate it by way of, number one, of course, at an appropriate time, giving the statehood back to them, again making it into a state. Secondly, holding the election at an appropriate time and handing over the reins of the state back to the people of the state. That's one thing that government should do at an appropriate time. I can tell you, government is definitely working in the direction. New delimitation exercise is going on. Once the exercise is over, state will get its own legislature. I hope that at a later appropriate time, state will get its statehood also back. Since you asked this question, I want to add just one more point which is important for all of us. Now, government from its side, whatever it needs to do for Jammu and Kashmir, it has done it. It's also continuing to do whatever is needed for the state. But as people, we have a very important thing to understand and do. There is one responsibility on us also. What is that? Let me take just 1 minute to explain. We are all largely ABVP background people. In ABVP, we used to have that slogan, Jammu Kashmir Hamara Hai. Kashmir us. And wo Kashmir Hamara Hai, jo Sara ka Sara Hai. That used to be the slogan. I mean, whatever is under the control of Pakistan is ours, the whole Kashmir is ours. may I ask you a humble question? When you say Kashmir is ours, what do you mean? Is it about territory? No, remember, when we are saying Kashmir is ours, it should mean to people in this state that every Kashmiri is ours. The people of Kashmir, Jammu, all these areas should feel that the rest of the country is there to embrace me. They all are there to stand by me. We are all one people. That feeling needs to be given to the people of Jammu and Kashmir, especially people of Kashmir Valley. So Kashmir is ours means every Kashmiri is ours. That should be the approach that people should take. Government will take administrative measure. People should take this measure. So I give you one suggestion and this answer. The suggestion is when you youngsters, next time you plan your vacation, plan it for Srinagar or Gulmarg. Next time you plan your pilgrimage, plan it for Amarnath Yatra or Vaishno Devi Yatra. Next time you plan your, some of the youngsters, you plan your honeymoon, go to Gulmarg, don't go to Switzerland. So these are the kind of measures by which you should connect with the people of Kashmir Valley, people of Jammu and Kashmir. That's an important step we should take. Having said it, I'm happy that a lot of Indians are today going. If anybody wants to go next week, you won't get any hotel rooms in Kashmir today. That's the kind of tourist activity that has picked up, which is very good. That's why we have to now embrace and influence the people of the valley, make them a part of our national mainstream.
Yes. So another thing that is not discussed very often, and the liberals, bleeding hearts who always focus on one realm, seem to forget, is the treatment of the Shia community. And you've written about this also in your editorial in Indian Express. That they were, the Shia community, the Bakrawals, they were the SCs, STs. They were treated not very well. Did not have rights to property. Could not get jobs in government. Would you like to expand on that a little bit? The discrimination that was inbuilt into this article and how it was perpetuated not for one generation but for generations of people who had lived decades and were never able to come out of that.
Yes, precisely. That is what Article 370 had done to Jammu and Kashmir, people of Jammu and Kashmir. Article 370 actually empowered a small section of the Kashmiri ruling elite. The section highly discriminated. Please remember, Jammu and Kashmir is not any one homogeneous entity. It's a very heterogeneous population. Like for example, even in Kashmir Valley, there are various types of people there. Gujas are different. Bakrawals are different. There is a sizable community of Shia there. There are Pandits. There is a huge, almost 60-70,000 strong Sikh community there. Then of course, there is Jammu. There was Ladakh earlier. All these sections used to face huge discrimination at the hands of the small ruling clique in Jammu and Kashmir. So they used to, poor people, they used to fight, they used to scream. And in Jammu, there were a variety of refugees who came at the time of partition, West Pak refugees. Then there were Memory refugees. When 1970 war happened, at that time, there was one section again which became refugees. The Cham sector, which was given to Pakistan, from their refugees came. So all these refugees also were being discriminated against. They were not even given citizenship rights. When they were fighting, they were saying we were being discriminated against. Then the rulers were, saying that no, this is our right. When we now gave them their rights, the ruling clique says we are now being discriminated against. All 70 years. What you are doing was actually discriminating against our own people. Pandit's story we all know, but we do not know what happened to Dalits there. The Dalits of Jammu have not been given basic rights like schooling, jobs, small government benefits like hospital benefits for 70 years. They were denied state subject status. Women were denied their rights. There used to be this very funny law that if a woman of Jammu Kashmir origin marries a person outside of the state, if a woman, if she marries a person outside of the state, even if he is a Muslim, Lucknow Musliman ko shadi karti hai, then she would lose all her benefits as the citizen of Jammu and Kashmir state. It wouldn't apply to men in Kashmir. Like the Hurriyat leaders, they all have their wives either from Dubai or from Pakistan. It doesn't apply to them. They will have all rights. But if a woman marries outside the state, she would immediately forfeit her rights. Then women had to fight it out until the High Court of Jammu and Kashmir, which had finally said that it is wrong. Then what the clever leaders of Srinagar did was, they said, all right, woman, even if she marries outside the state, she would continue to remain the state citizen, but her children cannot claim citizenship.
Yes.
They were getting against their own people in the name of Article 370. What doing away with Article is was that the women of the state have got their full rights. The LGBT community of Jammu and Kashmir has got its full rights. The Dalits in the state have got their full rights. All the refugees in the state have got their full rights today. These were the people who were being discriminated against. When we are giving rights to the discriminated people, those who are enjoying the rights, so they are screaming, no, we are being discriminated against, we are being oppressed. And you are the ones who are oppressing the people in your state. So this has to be highlighted properly.
Ram Madhavji, I think India is telling me that Dattaji has also joined this meeting, I think as a listener. He is in our midst as well. So I thought I would mention that to you. Ram Madhavji, I was quite amused when I was researching for our meeting. Every time you write an article for Indian Express, I saw that the National Herald, which is the Congress mouthpiece, does an analysis of your column and then does a rebuttal. And it's a funny trend because you will write something and then they will do like break it down line by line. And that is the kind of censure that goes into taking even a slightly divergent line, or of course you have a very well-defined thought on this. But it must have been intellectually a big barrier to move to the, to be able to kind of actually make something like Article 370 happen and even mainstream the discourse of it happening. How much of a challenge was that? And I think that's been something very successfully managed by you and others, of course.
The whole credit goes to Prime Minister Modi's government. What is very important to understand is that generally the whole country has welcomed it. The whole country. I'm sure you must be meeting with dozens of people on a daily basis. You would hardly come across anybody who would probably tell you that no, you should not have been done in Kashmir. Hardly you come across. Ordinary people, okay? Somebody is aligned with a particular political party like Congress would always say that no, we don't agree with you. But if you speak to normal Indians, because I travel also, like many others travel, like Dattaji, we all travel constantly. We see a lot of happiness, lot of jubilation in the country across the political and adjust spectrum. Probably somebody who was voting to another party, he also would tell us that on Kashmir, what you did is the right thing. Because after all, it's a question of country's unity and integrity. Now, there will be national heralds. There will be a few online portals which would continue to dissect and try to disseminate some kind of wrong information. Fair enough. In a democracy, the healthy debate is always welcome. Healthy or unhealthy debate, you can't control it. It will happen. It will happen. But I can tell you with utmost confidence that largely 90% of the country, irrespective of religion, irrespective of political affiliation, irrespective of ideologies, has welcomed this decision of doing away abrogation of Article 370.
And Ram Madhavji, we're getting to the end of our very interesting hour with you. I wanted to ask one question. What do you see 5 years from now in Kashmir? What do you see happening? What will be the environment? What will, how will this have evolved? What kind of polity will be in place? Because you've been a big critic of the kind of entitled and dynastic politics which has in many ways held a New Delhi ransom as well, while kind of lining their pockets and keeping control. And the old thought, or rather the UPA thought, was keep them happy and Kashmir will not be a problem for us. So how do you see all of this changing in the next 5 years?
One most important thing that I should keep in mind is that Kashmir is not a narrative about development alone. Many people have this particular misnomer that now that Article 370 has been done away with, we should do a lot of developmental activity there so that everything will be hunky-dory there. Please remember, because I have dealt with that state, I know the entire discourse in that state. It's not about development. Development is needed. Development is needed as much in Kashmir as it is needed in Marathwada. We need development across the country. What is important in Jammu and Kashmir is about winning the battle of narratives. You must remember that especially in Kashmir, a major narrative battle continuously goes on. Reason is there is a great neighbor, namely Pakistan, which is interested in perpetuating a very, very wrong narrative in the state. The challenge for all of us, that's why I have been repeatedly saying that people also have a role to play, is to win over the hearts and minds of the people of Kashmir. Once you succeed in winning over the hearts and minds of the people of Kashmir, all other things can be easily taken care of. Show me one state in the country which will tell you that, okay, I have had enough development, I am not no longer asking for any development. The most developed state also will say, I need more. So development is an unending thirst. So people continue to demand for more. We should continue to do that. But what is the real challenge in Kashmir is to win this battle of narratives, win over the hearts and minds of the people there who have come under continuous 7 decades of constant, brainwashing, constant, bombardment of very wrong narrative about India. I give you one small example for all of us to understand. Now in Kashmir, we are holding elections. 3 layers of Panchayat Raj elections have taken place. Villages, blocks, and district development councils. Legislature election also will take place. We have seen an average voting percentage of about 25% in Kashmir Valley. 25% sometimes, if you look at the history of Kashmir Valley, it looks like a very respectable number. But we also now should think about who are those 75% who are not coming for voting. Because this 25% that's coming for voting is traditional families which have been aligned with either PDP or NC or Congress or BJP. But there is another 75% which is, even in spite of all these parties joining the elections, NC joining, PDP joining, they're refusing to vote. That means that is where your challenge is. That is where your actual work needs to be done. That 75% should be convinced that, okay, you go and vote for your own party. We are not saying you should vote for BJP, but go and vote. Through that, you show your allegiance to Indian Constitution, Indian political system. That challenge remains. That challenge cannot be completed merely by development. It has to be completed by all of us connecting with the people there. So I think next 5 years for us will be a challenge from that perspective, winning over the hearts and minds of the people. A lot of very conducive atmosphere is there in this state. It only calls for a lot of hard work from all of us.
Hello, ma'am. Are you there? Okay, a few minutes are left for the session. Just take 2 questions from the participant section, sir.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. Please go ahead and ask
Okay,
the
ma'am.
question. Bhargavi, ask the question.
Okay, ma'am. So the first question is, what is the role of government and RSS to build the vandalized temples in Jammu and Kashmir?
There is a new, not exactly a new bill, a bill called the Shrines Bill, Jammu and Kashmir Shrines Bill, which is pending before the administration. This Shrine Bill is actually intended for restoration of dozens of destroyed or dilapidated temples, mainly temples, also a few groups, a few other religious places also, but largely temples. This bill is actually pending the approval of obviously right now the government is Union Home Ministry, so approval of the Union Home Ministry. Once that bill is passed, then government can step in and manage the existing dilapidated temples. They can be renovated and all that. Having said it, let me also tell you one good news. In the last few years, especially after this BJP also forming the government in the state and all that, and now in the last 2-3 years under the president's rule, Kashmiri Pandits have been able to revive a few temples. Like Kheer Bhavani is one example, but several other temples have also been revived in a big way. Now festivals happen in several of these temples, while a number of temples still need a special drive to renovate and all that. A few temples have been activated. Hindus go there, do their worship, and festivals take place. Of course, Kheer Bhavani never ceased to stop their religious activity. Kheer Bhavani activity has always gone on. Similarly, the Shankaracharya Hill in Srinagar city, that also has now become a very active religious shrine for Hindus. Tourists also go, plus local Hindus and others also go. Some kind of revival of these temples has started happening there. Once this shrine bill is passed, I think government will be empowered or armed with a legislation that will allow it to renovate all those destroyed or dilapidated temples.
Yes, sir. So we have the last question here. As there is huge problem of Pakistan-sponsored terrorism in Kashmir, and it is being a prolonged problem since independence, which is being responsible for huge funds being directed just towards stopping this terrorism. And also it is costing lives of our soldiers. How our government is going to deal with this and going to stop youth of Kashmir to not getting polarized by Pakistan's agenda?
Yes, that is one of the major challenges that the administration in the state and also the government at the center faces. As I mentioned earlier, the rulers in Pakistan, with some honorable exceptions here and there in the past history, they have always tried to use Kashmir issue for their own, internal political reasons also. They always used to exploit the situation in Kashmir. They used to, support and, push terrorists into the valley and all that. It has two sides of it. Number one, the terrorists who infiltrate into the state or who succeed in mobilizing some youths in the state, especially in the valley, to take to gun, to become terrorists. Over the last many years, the Indian security establishment has developed enough resilience, enough strength to tackle with this problem. I don't feel really happy to say that, but let me tell you for your understanding of it, that there used to be a time when a terrorist created in Kashmir Valley, whether from Pakistan or from within, used to continue with terror activities for 2 years, 3 years before he is caught, captured or killed. But today, the life of a terrorist in Kashmir Valley, the shelf life is a few months. You are sure to utilize the security agencies. So our security agencies have developed enough mechanisms to tackle this menace of terrorism. In fact, I can tell you my own personal experience. Just before the abrogation of Article 370 on 5th of August, 4 days before that, on 1st of August, I was in the valley. I also did not know that it was going to be such a major decision. I was only indicated that there would be some decision. So just get the feedback from our agencies and others, what would be the fallout. So when I asked our security establishment there, they simply said only one thing. They said, sir, go ahead and do whatever is in your opinion good for the state. You go ahead and do that. Leave this handling of terrorists, everything on us. We are quite capable. We'll take care of them. And that they have been doing. So terrorism per se, we have developed enough capability to tackle that. But the bigger problem is the other side of it. With one terrorist being created with a gun in his hands, 10 youths get indoctrinated with the separatist ideology. That is where the real battle is. That's why I have been saying that the real challenge for all of us is to win over hearts and minds of the Kashmiris. We have to tell them that this propaganda of Pakistan is totally false. Look at the condition of the people in Pakistan itself. Our own territory, which is under Pakistan occupation, Gilgit, Pakistan, there the people are struggling. They are being hugely oppressed. A lot of atrocities are being perpetrated against them. Same is the situation with Mirpuris, others. In Mirpur and all those areas, Kashmiri is no longer spoken. It's all Urdu now. They have lost their language. They have lost their cultural freedom. How Pakistan is oppressing its own people. What is it doing to Baluchs? Every day they kill dozens of Baluchs. They perpetrate enormous atrocities on Sindhis. Pashtuns are also facing a lot of Pashtuns are also facing a lot of atrocities. So the situation inside Pakistan also should be told to the misguided youths in the valley. And as against the kind of development that you see in Pune, most of you are sitting in Pune. What kind of wonderful life that youth in these cities, in Pune, in Bengaluru, in Hyderabad, in Chennai, in Gurgaon, in Delhi, how wonderful life we are leading. This needs to be positively explained to the youths of Jammu and Kashmir. That challenge remains. So terrorism has two sides. One side is those who wield the gun and try to perpetrate acts of terror, but the other side is the indoctrinated, misguided youth of the valley. We have taken enough measures to tackle the gun-wielding fellows. As I said, hardly in 2 months we tackle them, but those whose minds are being polluted to constant propaganda, that is and continues to be a challenge, which we are all playing tenders. Government is of course doing it. RSS and its Parivar organizations continuously do a lot of activities to win over these people. I must share with you something I myself have experienced. In 2003, as RSS spokesperson, I went to Anantnag. Anantnag is the hotbed of Islamic terror. The terrorist organizations in Kashmir terror groups. So our people have this a public program in a place. 300 Kashmiri people came, men and women came. That was the kind of risk that they used to take in 2003. So those efforts have paid off today. There are a large number of people who are wholeheartedly Indian, by heart Indian. Their minds and hearts beat for India. There are a large number of people in Kashmir Valley because of these efforts by RSS and other Indian BJP. We need to increase those efforts. That's why I said earlier also, the challenge is winning the hearts and minds of especially the youth of Kashmir Valley.
Thank you so much, Ram Madhav. It was enlightening as always. I know you're a foreign affairs expert, and I'm so tempted to ask you questions, but they're off subject. So you can say I don't want to answer, but I'm very keen to know about. I've lived in Burma, so I feel very emotionally connected to what is happening there right now. That is one. And the second is, this is my own personal observation and interaction with a lot of foreign media and people like that. Pakistan is much more aggressive, I can say, in terms of their propaganda internationally when it comes to Kashmir. And our response always seems to be reactive. So these are the, and this is like, we've seen this over and over again. And based purely on my own interactions and observations and what I see going on, and the cancelling of people, who kind of take a pro-India stance on Kashmir, even internationally. So just your views on these two aspects, and then I will not ask you any more questions and we'll let you go.
No, this is also a very important thing, but you must understand that in the last 5-6 years, especially Prime Minister Modi's foreign policy has been a hugely proactive foreign policy. You are right. We used to be a very reticent nation when it came to foreign policy, reach out and all. But Prime Minister Modi has changed it. Now that has put Pakistan in a very deep corner. Pakistan has been hugely cornered today. What we have done was to, of course, improve our relations with all the important Western powers. But more importantly, the way we cultivated the Arab countries, right from Saudi Arabia to UAE, even to Qatar, and how we developed our relations, with countries like Iran, has actually created a very, very difficult situation for Pakistan. Today, Pakistan is left with only one friend, that is China. There is nobody else standing by Pakistan. Even Saudi Arabia is asking Pakistan to return their money. UAE is putting a lot of pressure on Pakistan. America, of course, is putting a lot of pressure. International agencies like FATF are putting pressure on Pakistan. This has become possible, cornering Pakistan, forcing Pakistan leadership to now come forward for friendliness with India. It was only because Prime Minister Modi took a very proactive approach to tackling Pakistan. See, there are two ways of tackling Pakistan internationally. One is directly confront with them. Two, simply encircle them. What we did was we covered them from all sides. We removed their support that they used to get from the Arab world. We targeted America. We built good relationship with America and Western powers. So that is the reason why today Pakistan was forced to lower its aggression, reduce its aggression, and General Bajwa is today talking the language of peace with India. Not out of any great love for India, not any love for peace, but he is forced to do that today because of a very strategic and proactive encirclement that our government in the last 6 years it has succeeded in bringing about. I think in that sense we have changed our strategy and it has worked well for us.
Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
I said, I think we must thank Mr. Madhav and let him go now. We've exceeded our time with him and we want him to return again and again. So I think thank you so much, Ram Madhavji. It's always so informative and illuminating to hear from you, especially because you always present a very realistic picture and a fact-based picture, which makes a lot of the shrill news that we get or the opposition heckling and all of that kind of political discourse. You're able to distill that into something that we can carry back and take away. So thank you very much once again for joining us this evening.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure interacting with such bright youngsters. Thank you and my regards to all of you.
Yes, sir. So we have come to an end of the session. So thank you so much, sir and ma'am. It was indeed a great discussion, and I'm sure everyone has got a lot of insights and knowledge. Thank you so much, both of you, for giving your valuable time to grace this session. Lastly, I would like to place my hearty thanks to all the organizers, Sai Singh ji, Ganesh ji, Mrityunjay ji, Shivam ji, Pratik ji, Aditya ji, Shubham ji and Pradyumna ji, and also all the volunteers and participators because of whom we made this session possible. Thank you so much once again, sir and ma'am. Thank you so much. We shall end the session.